That's enough. You're practically a stranger. Let's throw you out into the yard.
Please wait. I was grabbed by the arm and, just as she said, thrown out into the yard. The window slammed shut in front of me, and I felt the blood drain from my face in despair. No, why? This isn't right. Was my mother-in-law serious about making me live in the yard? The door was locked from the inside, and I was at a loss. I thought about going back to my parents' house, but it was quite a distance away, and I didn't think I had enough money for the fare. As my mind went blank, the window suddenly opened. I hoped she had reconsidered, but the voice that came back was still as cold as ice.
Eat this.
What my mother-in-law handed me was a box of cup noodles that had been stored for emergencies. Seeing the box placed on the ground, I was convinced that they were serious. No way! Please wait! My desperate plea was in vain, and the window mercilessly closed in front of me. If something happens to me, it will be their problem. Maybe if I throw away the contents, they'll give me proper food. I decided to throw away all the contents in a fit of rage. As I roughly opened the box, I found it among the tightly packed cup noodles. Huh? There was one with the lid half open. I reached out cautiously and picked up the cup noodle. What? This is... My name is Bonnie. I'm a housewife in my 40s. Ever since I married Dewey, there's been something that's been bothering me for decades. It's... Dewey, I've always told you to put away your clothes. The clothes scattered in the living room were those Dewey had taken off after coming home from work. Dewey has a habit of changing clothes as soon as he gets home and leaving them on the floor. Even now, despite my request, he was lying on the sofa looking at his phone. Not only that, but he was also watching videos at a loud volume and laughing. Perhaps because I interrupted his relaxation time, Dewey spoke in a tone that clearly showed he found it bothersome.
It's fine, isn't it? Why are you so picky? It's not bothering anyone.
It's bothering me.
Huh? Why are you in a bad mood? Over something like this? There aren't any hysterical old ladies these days. What are you going to do if you get more wrinkles?
I frowned at the uncalled for insult. Yes, I was completely fed up with Dewey's condescending words and attitude. Moreover, that wasn't the only problem. It's really a small thing, isn't it? Just put your clothes in the laundry basket.
That's why I hate nagging women. You depend on my earnings. Do you understand that you can't live properly without me?
Dewey grumbled and then called out loudly to someone.
Dad! Bonnie is telling me to put away my clothes!
Wait a minute! Since it's a house, it wouldn't bother the neighbors like in an apartment, but loud voices still echoed. As if to prove this, heavy footsteps approached from the hallway, and the living room door was roughly opened. It was my father-in-law, Finley. Finley growled in a low voice from his throat and glared at me sharply.
It's your job to do that.
His voice, like an explosion, struck my eardrums. The intimidation made me shrink my shoulders.
Listen up. You married into this family, so just listen to Dewey. That's what women are supposed to do. Don't bother me or Dewey with trivial matters.
I'm sorry. At this point, I had no choice but to apologize. Dewey watched me with a smirk. Finley was a man with rigid, old-fashioned views. Whenever I voiced my opinions about housework or Dewey's behavior, he would get furious and tell me not to think about such things. It wasn't uncommon for him to hit me, and I had developed a habit of shrinking reflexively. Dewey had already shifted his attention back to the video on his phone, ignoring me. I felt a dark cloud over me, thinking I had to wait quietly until his father's anger subsided. Then, another person called out to me.
Hey, Bonnie, I told you not to use ham in cooking.
It was my mother-in-law, Paige, who appeared from the kitchen where I had just finished making dinner.
It contains sodium nitrite. It's not good for your health. And get rid of that strange machine Dewey brought. It shrinks the brain with electromagnetic waves. A famous author said so.
Paige didn't argue like Dewey or yell like Finley. But she was never on my side. Even now, she sighed, holding aluminum foil that supposedly blocked brain-reaching electromagnetic waves. Paige was into conspiracy theories. I'm sorry, Paige. But we need to get enough protein.
There you go again. Where is this fish from? Did you check the origin? And the additives?
She was overly sensitive to the effects of electromagnetic waves and harmful food additives. Because of this, cooking took much more effort than usual. She would check the ingredients of every food item and restrict their use in cooking. As a result, the meals never looked appetizing. Feeling helpless about the wasted ingredients, Paige suddenly remembered something.
By the way, you mentioned before that Dewey eats out a lot. Were you really jealous?
Apparently, Dewey heard that.
Jealous?
He turned to me, annoyed, having been engrossed in his video.
I eat out for work. It's not like you, just doing housework.
That's not what I meant.
You live off my earnings, yet you have the nerve to act high and mighty.
He glanced at his father as he spoke. Realizing what he was about to do, I could only desperately apologize. I'm sorry. As a housewife, I relied entirely on Dewey for our daily life. My finances were controlled by the allowance Dewey gave me, and he would reduce it whenever he was displeased. Satisfied with my trembling apology, Dewey said,
You can't do anything without me.
He threw something at me.
As punishment, this is your dinner tonight.
A cup of instant noodles rolled to my feet with a light sound. No! I was the one who cooked every meal for the family, and housework was never easy. But I couldn't say anything back and remained silent. In this house, I had no freedom. Why was I going through this? Unable to stay in the living room any longer, I took the cup noodles and went back to my room. From the living room, I could hear the loud TV and Dewey's voice complaining about things at work. I boiled water in the kettle, but I didn't feel like eating, and I sighed heavily, alone. How can they say such hurtful things? Remembering their unreasonable words made me feel depressed. I had only asked him to fix his habit, which wasn't an unreasonable request. The more I thought about it, the darker my mood became, and I wondered where I had gone wrong. I couldn't move for a while, feeling heavy-hearted. As bedtime approached and my hunger reached its limit, I reluctantly ate the cup noodles and took a shower. If I caught a cold, I would have to ask Dewey for money and permission to go to the hospital, so I quickly got out before my body got too cold. I tiptoed down the quiet hallway, trying not to make any noise, and returned to my room. I took out the diary I had secretly kept in my drawer. This diary was a record of daily events, meant to one day expose how I was treated. When I first started dating Dewey, he wasn't like this. He cherished our anniversaries and birthdays, and I had never seen him speak harshly. I married him believing he was a kind person, but the reality was completely different. In this house, I am somehow treated as something filthy. This is largely due to Paige's influence, who is into conspiracy theories. Not knowing about conspiracy theories, I had been avoided because I had lived a lifestyle that Paige rejected, fearing it might negatively affect her son. I was made to prepare separate meals and had never once been part of their circle. However, I was somewhat grateful that I could secretly eat what I liked and write in my diary like this. I hope I can expose this properly someday. I had wanted to ask for help more than once. But the thought that my parents might be harmed kept me from taking action. Even if I wanted to escape, it was difficult without sufficient funds, and who would hire a woman in her 40s who had been a housewife all this time? At times like this, Dewey's words, "You can't live without me," hit me hard, and I felt tears of helplessness welling up. In the end, I couldn't come up with a solution, and I could only curl up in bed and sleep. The next day, there was an unusual commotion outside my room. Wondering what had happened, Finley hurriedly opened my door.
Hey, call an ambulance right now! Dewey is...
Apparently, when he went to wake Dewey, who was sleeping later than usual, he found him not breathing in bed. I frantically called an ambulance. Even if he had mistreated me for years, I couldn't ignore a life-threatening situation. I listened to the paramedic's voice over the phone and desperately tried to perform CPR, but Dewey didn't make it.
No, why?
He seemed fine until yesterday, so why did his condition suddenly deteriorate? The suddenness of it all left me in shock, unable to even start preparing for the funeral after returning from the hospital. The atmosphere around me was heavy and different from usual.
Come to think of it, he did seem unwell lately.
Really?
Finley muttered. With his son gone, he didn't have the energy to yell at me. I had no idea Dewey had been feeling unwell. We hardly ever saw each other, as he was at work while I did housework during the day, and we ate in separate rooms. But I couldn't help but think that I should have noticed something. No matter how deep the rift between us, Dewey's death was still a fact. Forgetting my usual demeanor, I leaned forward.
Then why didn't he go to the hospital? If he was that unwell, there must have been signs.
I told him not to go. I also told him to stop taking over-the-counter medicine. We never know what they might put in it,
Paige said in a prim tone. It seemed that even knowing Dewey was unwell, she couldn't abandon her belief in conspiracy theories. I was overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness for such a reason. I was at a loss for words, both at Dewey, who believed his mother's claims, and at Paige, who didn't doubt the baseless conspiracy theories. I see. It seems that when people are faced with something they can't handle, they tend to laugh. I shook my shoulders slightly. But that was a mistake.
What's that reaction?
A voice so low it seemed to come from the depths of the earth shook my eardrums. Startled, I looked up.
Oh, no, it's not like that.
What do you mean it's not like that? You laughed, didn't you? Are you the kind of person who laughs at Dewey's misfortune?
I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention.
I was thinking about Dewey. I had completely overstepped. Maybe my emotions weren't working properly in the face of sudden misfortune. But there was no way to take it back, and Paige's cold voice pierced me.
No excuses. The fact is you laughed. Could it be that you poisoned him?
No, I didn't do anything like that. I shook my head, almost in tears. Given how badly Dewey had treated me, there were plenty of reasons to suspect me. Even though Paige directed most of the meals, I was the one who prepared their food.
Enough. Without Dewey, you're just a stranger. Let's throw you out into the yard.
Exactly. Don't think you'll ever be allowed back in.
Please, wait. Finley grabbed my arm and literally threw me out into the yard. The window slammed shut in front of me, and I felt the blood drain from my face in despair. No, why? It's not true. Living in the yard was out of the question. The door was locked from the inside, and I panicked. I couldn't even retrieve my diary to make my accusations. The thought of returning to my parents' house crossed my mind, but it was quite a distance from here. I didn't think I had enough money for the fare. As my mind went blank, the window suddenly opened. Paige! Throwing me out into the yard would be seen by the neighbors and wouldn't be good. Hoping she had reconsidered, I called out, but her voice was still as cold as ice.
Don't call me so casually. If something happens, it would be a nuisance for us. So eat this. It's full of additives, though.
What she handed me was a box of emergency cup noodles. Seeing the box placed on the ground, I realized they were serious. No way! Please wait! There was no kettle or kitchen in the yard, so I couldn't even eat properly. But my desperate plea was in vain, and the window closed mercilessly in front of me. I stood there in shock for a while. But as time passed, I began to feel anger welling up from the bottom of my stomach. I can't take this anymore. What had I done to deserve this? I admit it was wrong to laugh. But they didn't listen to what I said. They never did. There was no freedom for me here, and anything they didn't want was completely rejected. It was useless to say anything to people who had no intention of listening. If something happens to me, it would be a problem for them, so maybe if I throw away the contents, they'll give me proper food. I decided to throw away all the cup noodles out of spite. It seemed wasteful, but the thought of living on cup noodles was even worse. As I roughly opened the box, I found something among the tightly packed cup noodles. Huh? It's open! One of the lids was half open. I clenched my fist with a bad feeling. Could this be another one of their pranks? I reached out cautiously and picked up the cup noodles. As I fully opened the half-open lid, I found dried noodles, a small black device, and a note inside. What is this? I opened the note. It reads simply, "I'm truly sorry for making you suffer for so long. The device included is a voice recorder. Take this evidence to the police. The envelope contains money for you. Use it to live freely." Could this be? The elegant stationery and the neat handwriting, written with a fountain pen, were unmistakably Paige's. The envelope contained 5 $100 bills, and inside the box of cup noodles, there were similar envelopes with $500 each, stuffed into the small gaps of the lids. Additionally, some of them contained detailed reports of Finley and Dewey's domestic actions. Before I knew it, I had rushed to the nearest police station as if pushed from behind. "Please, help me!" Seeing me out of breath, the police officer immediately responded. As the officer read through the reports and listened to my story, his expression grew increasingly grim. He realized that I had been thrown out into the yard and couldn't enter the house or return to my parents' home, and he judged it to be an urgent matter. The officer, with a serious expression, patted my shoulder to reassure me.
I see. This is terrible. Bonnie, you've done well. Can you take us to your house?
Yes! Finally, a turning point had come in my days of despair. Maybe the days of being oppressed by those people would change. As I returned home with faint hope, a sudden shout echoed from the entrance.
What are you doing?
It was Finley's enraged voice. Then, a sharp sound like something being struck hard echoed, and the front door was somehow unlocked, so we hurriedly opened it. What happened? There, we found Finley, breathing heavily, and Paige, crouching on the floor, holding her red, swollen cheek. Finley was so angry that he didn't even notice the police officer's arrival. It was clear what had happened. "Paige!" I screamed and rushed over, and Paige finally looked up. As soon as her vacant eyes caught sight of me and the police officer, she burst out laughing.
Ha ha ha.
"What's wrong, Paige?"
What are you laughing at? Dewey is gone, and now you want a divorce? Don't be ridiculous.
Between the two of them, there was a crumpled divorce paper. Could Paige have presented it? She had always been obedient to Finley and never contradicted him. Seeing her laughing hysterically as if she had gone mad, Finley raised his hand high.
Stop it!
But the officer quickly restrained him, stopping his movement. Only then did Finley realize the police officer was there. Seeing his face turn pale, Paige started laughing again.
Ha ha ha.
"What's really wrong, Paige?" Her increasingly abnormal behavior left us all frozen. I cautiously called out to her. Paige, her cheeks flushed with excitement, spoke with a smile.
Finally. It's over now, Finley.
What?
Finley, with a vacant look, squeezed out a voice from his throat. Without giving Finley time to process his shock, Paige continued.
You can't move at all now, can you? You can't hit me even if you want to, right? Do you know why? Because that police officer has more power than you. Bonnie and I have always felt the same way you do now.
What?
I've been waiting for this day for a long time.
I was too shocked to form coherent words. Paige's words were undoubtedly meant for me. Paige suddenly stopped laughing and wiped the expression from her face.
You're always like this. If something doesn't go your way, you immediately resort to hitting, and you can't stand it when others don't act according to your wishes. Dialogue is out of the question. You think it's only natural for people weaker than you to obey you and for you to be supported by others. Ever since Dewey was born, you've been violent towards me. You knew I couldn't escape as a stay-at-home mom estranged from my parents, didn't you? That's why I've been planning this day for a long time.
With a voice as cold as absolute zero, Paige began to talk about the plans she had been making, glaring at Finley with piercing eyes.
At first, I didn't have enough evidence,
And there was Dewey to consider. So I thought I'd execute the plan once Dewey became independent and I had enough savings. I never imagined Dewey would marry Bonnie so quickly and end up doing the same things as you. Dewey was more cowardly than you, but also sly, so I pretended to be a crazy person who believed in conspiracy theories and fed you both terrible food.
Hearing this, I was taken aback. Indeed, as a stay-at-home mom tasked with taking care of Paige, I had been preparing meals for the three of them. These meals, following Paige's instructions, avoided additives and foreign ingredients, and didn't look appetizing at all. But Paige, who disliked me, would say she didn't want to eat the same food as me and made me prepare separate meals for myself. So, I cooked and ate what I liked. If what she said was true, was it all an act? Had Paige excluded only me from her plan all along?
It was a long-term strategy, but it worked out as I intended with Dewey. The daily overwork and poor diet must have taken their toll.
Paige's voice dropped for a moment, perhaps thinking of her son. However, in the next moment, she burst into laughter as if a fire had been lit.
But now, Dewey's inheritance can go to Bonnie. Finley and I are going to hell together. Ha ha ha.
Finley seemed unable to say anything anymore. He stared at Paige, who was laughing like a mad woman, with wide eyes.
You've always acted like a king in the house, but do you understand? You were this powerless all along.
I wasn't the only one suffering. Paige had endured and suffered for much longer than I had, and she had fought, distorting a long part of her life, to reach this day.
Let's go. You both need to come to the station. We'll hear the details there.
The officer said quietly. Finley no longer raised his voice in anger. He slumped as if all the energy that had driven him was gone. As he was being led away by the officer, he said in a barely audible voice,
I'm sorry.
But Paige responded with a voice that was a mix of crying and laughing.
What good does it do to apologize now?
And without another word, we quietly walked to the police station. Finley readily admitted to everything recorded in the reports and on the voice recorder about the domestic situation. As a result, it was determined that Dewey's condition was not a sudden health issue but a planned event, and it was deemed a criminal case. Of course, the perpetrator is Paige. After finishing her story, Paige, who had been laughing triumphantly, suddenly became weak as if all her malice had been a lie.
Bonnie, I'm truly sorry for involving you in my plan.
Please, don't apologize. You've been suffering all this time too.
No, even so, it doesn't change the fact that I hurt you many times.
I remembered the letter in the cup noodles, written in her neat handwriting. Now, it seemed that her beautiful handwriting, considerate of the reader, reflected her true nature.
It must have been very sad to see the food you worked so hard to make thrown away for incomprehensible reasons, right?
No! I shook my head. Indeed, it was painful at the time, and there were many nights when my pillow was wet with tears, but now it seemed like a trivial matter. It wasn't about forgiveness or not. I felt that we were finally free. It's okay now. It's all over. 10 years have passed since then. Today is Paige's birthday. After gathering the courage to start working, I was fortunate to find a warm workplace and live an independent life. Today, I was carrying out a plan to take Paige on a trip, secretly saving my salary. Look, Paige, the dogwood flowers are beautiful. Paige, who had been tense both physically and mentally to carry out her plan, fell ill once everything was resolved. As I pushed her wheelchair, which had become essential for her mobility, we walked under an arch of blooming dogwood flowers.
Yes, they are very beautiful.
Paige seemed to be enjoying this modest trip. After that incident, I decided to support Paige. Now, Paige is an important member of my family. We care for each other, exchange words, and sometimes enjoy time together like this. Paige, I also have a special birthday cake ready. Let's eat it together when we get back to the hotel.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Chatting, we slowly walked under the dogwood flowers, enjoying the nearby shops and tourist stores. Paige seemed to be enjoying herself, so I could say this trip was a great success. We have gained our freedom and do what we want as our hearts desire. Humming, happy birthday to you, I hope these days would continue forever.
How was this story? Please subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.